back, and now it's time for our second segment of the breakfast show, and in it we will be talking about tolerance, we will be talking about compassion and forgiveness and more. And today we're joined in the studio by Professor of Sociology, Dr. Zaineb Shahin. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
Good morning, Doctor. First of all, let's talk about the idea that you were talking about, tolerance and forgiveness. And if we can just understand the importance of this in our life, things will not be like this. Life will change a lot, actually.
We have to bear in mind that tolerance, forgiveness, accommodation of values that excuses others for whatever deviation on our perception has occurred is very important, and proof of that, it is instilled in our religions, in different religions. Emphasis is put on forgiveness, among other virtues that are addressing the community of believers. Values of love, compassion, forgiveness, giving, all these values are very important in order to build a strong community of believers, a strong nation. This is the basis. Cannot do without having these values. So this is a proof that these values are of great importance for society members, and that's why we have to build on it. We have to stress it in our socialization system.
Now, Doctor, how can we do that? How can we stress it and consolidate it and make sure that it's enhanced?
First of all, and we have to bear in mind that socialization institutions like the family, like education, school, universities, and so on, like religious institutions, media, all these institutions are of vital importance to instill values in individuals. And that's why I think they should play a very important role in this respect and try to enhance these values through whatever programs they adopt. So this is the way to emphasize and instill these kinds of virtuous values in the community of believers.
Doctor, talking about empathy as well, as you mentioned right now, and we can see that it does not exist anymore. This is another important part, actually. Why do you think so, and how can we work on this? I mean, if everyone can work on his own, for example, or to start by himself.
Okay, you have to elaborate on what you mean exactly by empathy in this respect.
Just as you mentioned right now, just to feel the person in front of you and to understand what is going on, I want to put myself in his, as we say, to put myself in his shoe, and why he is doing this, why is he doing that. We have a lot of challenges on our daily basis.
Because I think we were brought up in a culture that emphasizes other decisions made by others for us. We do not retain our identity as our individualities. We have our individualities suppressed because parents, because family members, because schools, all these set priority to group decision as opposed to the initiation and individuality of persons involved. So because their individuality is suppressed, they feel that they have to make up for it as they grow up, so they strive for asserting their own stance, they're asserting their own ideas, and they don't at all look into the other's point of view and the other's rationale and the other's reason for his actions. They take it for granted that whatever one perceives is the right thing, as opposed to whatever is taken for granted by others.
Now, so to what extent is the social pressure and peer pressure involves such let's say behaviors, in other words?
Peer pressure is very, very important. Equally important is the pressure exerted by family members. So peer sometimes is more important than other pressures because of the same age category, the same age group, and so they are so much influenced by that. And that's why I always stress the notion that families have to be acquainted with our children's friends. They have to know more about them. They have to know their activities, their way of thinking, their families, because this allows parents to be enlightened with the kind of pressure exerted on their children, and therefore they can make any kind of solutions before any problem is expressed.
So, of course, we also have to admit that there is a diversification in the society as well. And the idea is that how to be tolerant and how to accept the different, whether it is the different in opinion, different in anything actually. We have to accept the different.
This again has to be set by socialization institutions, by the family, by the school, by the peer groups, by the media, by the religious institutions. This has to be set as a model that has to be emulated by members of the society, by individuals, because everyone, as I said before, assumes that what he says is the right thing and it doesn't give any attention to others' point of view, and that's why sometimes we have problems with managers. Every manager wants to set his own priorities, his own needs and his own understanding of the situation, as opposed to what ought to happen, which should be a continuation of policy set. So again, because our individualities in developing countries, in different nations, has been suppressed, and therefore they try to make up for that when they grow up. So this has to be addressed right from the beginning in our socialization patterns in the family.
So would that also need schools to be involved as well, Doctor?
Absolutely. If you go into content material, school material, educational material, you find it really not paying attention to this very important issue. For instance, in one of the texts would say, Adil is obedient. Adil does not challenge any statements. Taken for granted assumptions of what the professor says should be taken as the ultimate reality, and therefore there is no way to negotiation, there is no way to discussion, there is no way of challenging taken for granted assumptions of whatever issues raised. It is students are supposed to adhere to whatever is conveyed, and I believe this is a very wrong way of instructing our children. We have to give allowance to creativity, to challenge, to discussion, to challenging taken for granted assumptions. This is very vital in order to realize the kind of individuals we need for our society, who are broad mind, open-minded, and so on.
So how can the mother or the parents work on this? Talking about just making or bringing up the children as decision makers, maybe in some small decisions, for example, and guided as well of freedom of expression if they want to express themselves. A lot of things. How can the mother in particular deal with this? Because usually the mother is always in the front.
They have to evade authoritarian kind of relationship.
Which means?
They have to allow discussion, to allow different points of view, expression of different views. What our children say sometimes is so wise and so rational. We have to be open-minded to our children's views, and sometimes abide with what is thought to be rational and acceptable, and therefore they would help make the children more mature, more developed, and therefore less individualist and less self-centered, and therefore they can accommodate others' point of view, and therefore they can accommodate forgiveness, tolerance, acceptance of the other's views, and this is the basis of democracy.
Do you feel, Doctor, that our religious discourse needs also to address that issue, or do you feel that it's more, we need to work more on it socially rather than religiously as well?
Our religions accommodate values that address this very issue. That accommodates values of forgiveness, love, pious, honesty. But the problem is implementation. And here I think the work of the family and the work of the schools is very imperative, is very important in order to make these values implemented, realized. And I think this is not limited to the implementation of values, but also it extends to involve also laws. We have very active, viable laws, but the problem is of implementation, of realization of these laws. So this is what they should work on. If we really abide by laws, if we really abide by positive values, if we really abide by and positive value system, I think that would be really doing a great deal in the way of the development of the nation, because development of the nation is not limited to the infrastructure. It accommodates values and human development, which is very important to create a positive energy as opposed to negative energy, which impedes efforts of development.
How to give our children the chance to be an active member in the society, even kids, for example.
Exposure, different clubs, different communities, allowing dialogue, allowing exchange of views, as I said before. This is all helps in the maturity of development of our children. But I would like to seize this opportunity and mention something concerning forgiveness. I just read or heard of Ministry of Forgiveness that has been established in Dubai and this is really Emirat, and this is really a very important step forward. Earlier they established this Ministry of Happiness, which is again a very important start on development program, because you cannot give without being satiated and satisfied, and therefore if you're happy and if you forgive and allow to listen to other points of views and allow to excuse others, this is a very important step for development. So development is not limited to infrastructure, it is very much concerned with the human development.
Okay, so Doctor, because we're almost a minute away from wrapping up today's episode, what's your advice to us to lead a good life?
You have just mentioned that think of others' views, accept other views, love others, be more understanding of, as I said again, their points of views and their rationale, their priorities, their needs. Only then we can accommodate differences, and when we accommodate differences, we can live in a more democratized kind of society, which is again a very important priority for development.
Right at the end, Dr. Zaineb Shahin, Professor of Sociology, thank you very much for joining.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, and by this we come to the end of this episode of Breakfast Show, but first of all I have to thank my colleague. Thank you very much, Nashwa.
Thank you, Rasha. Thank you all for joining us on this episode of our Breakfast Show, and remember to join us again tomorrow for more on the Breakfast Show. So till then, thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for more coming up on Nile TV International.